All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Real Talk with Noah Khrachvik. I'm Noah, obviously, and you only got me today. So I apologize for not being Carlos or Eddie or Danny or anybody else that works with us. But I want to start something that looks a little different from a lot of what you see on the internet. Right? We talk theory all the time. We talk news, political analysis, etc. The one thing though that we're always doing that I think we don't really put enough thought into is how we talk to our family, our friends, our coworkers, etc., about Marxism, about the need for socialism. So that's what we're going to do here tonight, and hopefully going forward from now on. We're going to go to, we're going to do that right after the international.
Cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So the international always gets me so inspired, Video, man, that's got this like one clip of me. First of all, we all look a bit younger. It was a few years ago, but it's got this one clip of me, and Carlos makes fun of me for it all the time, and I hate it. Where I'm like hunched over like this. We really need a new intro video. So if anyone out there has skills in that, let me know. Me and Eddie have been tossing around the idea of playing the international ourselves for it, which might be cool. But anyway, whatever. So tonight we're gonna start this new series called Real Talk, where y'all and me talk out how we actually approach the subject of socialism, how we win hearts and minds on the job, at Thanksgiving dinner, and whenever else. Because I really think that's lacking all over the left. We sort of believe that by knowing the facts, that's enough, but it's not. Even knowing Marxism is not enough. If we have the right message, we need to be able to package it in a way that actually appeals to people, that people understand, first of all, and can relate to, right? I didn't win over all of my coworkers to the need for socialism by, yelling at them that communism will win. I appealed to them on their level. So that's what we're going to do. And along the way, I want you all to feel free to ask any questions you want. A super chat will obviously get to the top of the line. It'll ping up. I'll see it right away. But I'll try to answer every single question you have. So yeah, that's what we'll do. I want to talk a little bit first about what's going on in the world, because we can't get away from the current genocide of the Palestinian people and the fight against it, right? I think right now is a time where we're beginning to separate the wheat from the chaff, the real from the pretend, right? And yes, you're seeing me drink coffee at 7. I'm staying up late tonight. I'm just doing it. But what I've noticed is a lot of people's sort of lack of motivation coming out, the fact that their heart's maybe not really in this. They talk a big game, but they don't walk the walk, right? I can yell and scream that Israel is wrong all I want. And here's where this ties in. But if I can't win hearts and minds, none of it fucking matters. None of it matters. We need to be able to have the facts and then present them in a way that people understand, that can appeal to them. And on this, it's just despicable. You all know Danny, obviously. He's our colleague here at the Institute. They're calling him an anti-Semite, which is funny because he works very closely with me. I mean, I talk to the man every day. He's clearly not an anti-Semite, but they're doing that and going after his job right now. Just like they went after Eddie's job in the past, how they went after our sister Kayla's job in the past. And that's not right. So how do we prevent that happening? Yes, we fight it when it happens, but the best way to do it is to prevent it from happening in the first place, right? To approach people with respect, even when they're not doing the same for us, is mandatory for a communist. We need to always remember this quote I love from Che that he says, or Che Guevara, he says that he can't imagine a revolutionary that isn't guided by a sense of love, a deep love. He says it's impossible to imagine a revolutionary not having that character. Oh, I see we got a super chat already. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt when you guys ask me things. Don't worry. I won't ramble all night, I promise. Abastan asks, hey man, how can I find reputable sources on Marx? It's a very good question. This is something I talk about a lot. The entire last period of American history has been filled with so much misinformation, so many misconceptions, mistakes, and straight up lies about Marxism, Marx, etc., that I would never be able to get enough sticks to beat it with, right? Just impossible. So what we recommend is going right to the source, right? Don't trust somebody else to interpret Marx for you. Do it yourself, but do it with guides, right? Do it with people that understand and have studied these things that can help teach you. Without Pops, my dad, I would have no clue anything about dialectics or Marx or Marxism, none of that. So find that. And lucky for you, we have what we call Marxism School here at the Institute. And our Basics of Marxism class that goes directly to the source material is for free online. It's sort of like we're trying to build this into a people's institute, right? A college that we can all participate in, help build up, and really give us the education necessary to overthrow the strongest ruling class in American history. So we need funding to do that. So a lot of times we'll have people give donations to attend classes, but the basics class, so that you're able to do your own Marxist analysis, will always be free. And in that we go directly to what Marxism really is. And that essential knowledge, everything else is built on top of that. A lot of people will say, just read Capital, which is the dumbest advice I've ever had in my life. You do that, first of all, it's boring in the beginning. You're gonna get turned off. And second, you don't understand the dialectic yet. So you can't understand what Marx is actually saying. The interconnection of all the pieces and the reason they're in a certain order. So we have this Basics of Marxism course that will teach you that. And so you can find that on YouTube. I'm not sure. You can probably get links to it on our website right now. I'm not sure. We're planning on revamping that. But yeah, YouTube. So thank you very much for that. Abastan. We got a couple more here. Julie says, no, I was wondering how you feel about a Jewish homeland as a Jew yourself, presumably with Jewish family members who are closer to the issues faced by Jews in Europe. Yeah. It's a tricky question. Our family, so we always joke in my family that we're Jewish, right? We're ethnically Jewish, but to hide from pogroms, my grandparents actually converted to Eastern Orthodoxy, right? So we're ethnically Jewish, but not really religious at all. And my mom and dad, my mom was actually an Irish Catholic, believe it or not. My dad wasn't religious at all. So we have Jewish family, but they're all back in the old country. Like most of them aren't here. Though I did grow up with a few good Jewish friends, so I was always plugged into this community anyways. Apparently, we always joked that we couldn't get away from it, right? When you're a Jew, you're just always a Jew. But so actually the best man in my wedding, his name's Fred. He's Jewish. But anyway, in the at the creation of Israel, right? It was created for a reason. And it was a subject that the Soviet Union was going into already. How to prevent another Holocaust, right? The slogan Israel was built upon was never again. Never be dependent on another people so that they can do that to you again. And that makes sense, right? The state of Azerbaijan, when it was the Jewish autonomous zone within the Soviet Union, makes sense. And the reason it makes sense within the Soviet Union is because it was actually a worker state, right? It wasn't just this nationalist thing full of bourgeois issues. It was a worker state. So as Israel develops, and at first, when all of these European Jews, especially Eastern European Jews, immigrate there, there's peace with the local Palestinian population. And it wasn't until the development of capitalism into its monopoly stage, accelerated by the alliance with our ruling class here in the US, that the problems arose, right? People talk about this racial hatred and this ethnic and religious hatred, and that's true. That's there. Don't get me wrong. But here's the insight that Marxism gives us that we often forget about. It is not racial hatred that creates the imperialism. It is instead the imperialism that creates the racial hatred. Like in the US, right? We're often told in our schools that people are just inherently racist, so they began chattel slavery. It was chattel slavery instead that begins the racism. And that difference, that is key to understanding how all of these things happen and how it proliferated into the monstrosity that Israel is right now. Now, there's another way we can think about this as well. And there are Jewish organizations here in the US that talk about this nonstop. What they say is that the creation of the promised land, which is very important to the Jewish religion, is the job of the Messiah. For people to go about that work is to do the work of the Messiah, and the hubris that has to take, it can't be understated. But what they say is that this strips them of their Judaism. So when they try to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Judaism or anti-Semitism, they're not doing that, right? That's a false parallel. You can't do that because according to the religion itself, they're no longer Jews, right? Ethnically, sure, but they've stripped themselves of this. And that's without getting into the sort of settling and like strong alliance of the ruling and middle class that they have there, sort of like here, right? Or the remnant of the middle class here. Anyway, that was a great question. So thank you for that one. I'm looking through here. Oh, I was correct. Yeah, so Azerbaijan was the first place they began it. But you're right, Mamaledo. That's where it actually was built in the real world. So thank you for correcting me there. All right. So let's sort of get into this the main event of the night, for lack of a better phrase. I was having a conversation with a coworker on Thursday, and he was asking me my opinion on what's going on and why he should even care. And that's a very good question, right? Why should we care? It has nothing to do with us, really. We don't know any of them. I've never met anyone from, well, no, I have, but most people haven't met anyone from Palestine. We're not friends with or family with anyone there. But why? So why should it matter, right? And it comes down to the material outlook on history and class struggle, right? Their enemy is our enemy, right? Their interests are our interests. As they fight back against this sort of supranational at this point bourgeois class, this cartel network of financial oligarchs and oil barons, the super majors, etc. They are fighting our enemy, right? What's good for them, therefore, is good for us. And I think that's really all there was to it. I got him talking about that and the sort of interests that coincide in them fighting our establishment. And he was right on board. He was like, oh, of course. And then from there, I get into, look, there are brothers and sisters, no matter what ethnicity they are, etc. They're like us, right? They're just regular working people trying to get by and being prevented from doing that right now. You know, how would we like it if people came into Cleveland and started just taking our houses, right? Preventing food from getting in, saying they're going to put us on a diet like they did in Palestine. We would do the same exact thing. And would it matter that the organizations doing it don't agree with us ideologically? No, it wouldn't, right? And that's another point that I want to talk about tonight. The left seems to eat itself, right? This is something we talk about all the time, the cannibalism of the left. And, you know, this has its roots in middle class prejudices that follow the reproletariat down into the reproletariat. But if you notice, we're too busy saying that we shouldn't listen to this person or that person who are effectively waging media struggles against the ruling class in support of our brothers and sisters in Palestine right now, to actually realize that that's what they're doing, right? We're saying they're not pure enough. I disagree with them on X, Y, and Z, or we make up some lie, or we just believe some lie because that's what, you know, is hip and going around on the left. So to give you an example of this, I don't care what your opinion is of him, Jackson Hinkle, right? We disagree with Jackson on quite a few things. But does that matter when he ratios the fucking president by calling Israel a terrorist state? No, it doesn't. Right? Why would it? You don't go to war with this made-up army that you picture in your head. That's the perfect army. You go to war with the army you got. And that's what I think is lacking here, this sort of real necessity of the moment for people. And that is, like I said, why it comes down from the middle class. When we're in the middle class, we're comfortable enough that there's no necessity. But reproletarianization is happening, and our conditions here are getting more and more impossible. That necessity, brothers and sisters, is upon us right fucking now. So do I care that I disagree with Jackson Hinkle on a few things? No. I care that he ratioed the president of the United fucking States. That is getting the message out that Israel is a terrorist state, which it is, factually true. And it's getting the message out packaged in a way that appeals to thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. And all the people saying, oh, they went to like ridiculous lengths of making up fake tweets that, like, you know, saying he was quoting Hitler and all this other insane things. I mean, the guy first, no, you know, he's not a theorist. He's a news guy. But he went on the Tim Pool show in front of millions of people and told those millions of people, actually, you were lied to about communism. It's good. And that is what people need to hear. His message is resonating with more people than any of these people telling you not to listen to it, right? And when it's the factual message, I can get in with that, right? I don't need to agree with him. I don't need to agree with him on all kinds of stuff. I can agree with him on this fight, and we can fight it together, standing shoulder to shoulder. Sorry, it's late for me, so I'm going to be drinking a lot of coffee. I just got a message from my sister. Yes, I chipped a tooth. I sleepwalk, right? And everybody who sleepwalks, and you may have heard this, you may not have, has a thing they do. My thing is I go into the bathroom and I throw my shirt in the toilet. I don't. It's just what I do, right? I'm sleeping. So sometimes so I would like the cat will meow or something, and it'll wake me up while I'm sleepwalking. And I woke up falling, and I fell and hit my face on the sink, on the bathtub, and then on the floor, and I chipped a tooth. So that's what it is, Aaron. Thank you. But yeah, so the message, right? The message and packaging it in a way that appeals to people is just as important as having the facts. Just as important. You can't just have one. You need both. And that's why we need all kinds of people who can be wrong on all kinds of different things. Bringing all kinds of other people together. Rallying more and more people from this corner of the country and that corner of the country. You know, to use Jackson Hinkle as an example again, he appeals to people I can't. Right? So why am I going to tell people don't listen to him? You know, if they ask me, what do you think about his opinion on X that I disagree with? I'll say, I disagree with that. You know, and we could even talk about it. I guarantee you, if I was like, yo, Jackson, let's talk about this, he'd probably do it. And he wouldn't yell at me. He wouldn't cancel me. That is the problem, right? It's the canceling, the inability to actually let the substance guide us, right? And that's what Marxism demands of us. Now, when we talk about the substance and the packaging, I have a few tips that I usually give people about this. I've been able to talk to all of my coworkers and get them on board for socialism. And there's one thing I do that I think everyone would benefit everyone. Never, ever, ever do any leftist cliche. Don't tell them anything they may have heard in the past, whether it's right or wrong. Word it differently. For example, moneyless, classless, stateless society. That's a shorthand. It's actually somewhat misleading of a shorthand that we all learn when we're new. Never use that. They've heard it. And what happens is the way the human brain works is we recognize patterns. And those patterns light up different parts of our brain, right? So when they hear something that goes into that, this is what I hate portion of their brain, they're closed off to you. You're never going to get in there. You're never going to be able to actually talk. They're going to argue instead and try to prove you wrong, even when they have no substance to do it with, even when they don't know they're doing it. So what you need to do instead is word things differently. Put it in a way they can understand and use the insights, the sort of places on there where they're on the edge of class consciousness to bring that forward and push them over that line, right? I'm laughing at what Covert Commander said. Good tanky, bad tank, and Noah and me, we are the NKVD. Yeah, that's absolutely true. This is what works for me, right? It's patience, it's understanding, it's being that person that walks the walk and sort of embodies, or at least I try to embody what it means to be a communist, which means embodying that progress to the next stage of history, that collective spirit that has to drive us, that love for all of the people, the entire working class that drives us. That's why I don't judge people. I don't cancel people. I know all of us are in different periods of learning in different areas at all times. There's things you know that I don't know. There's things I know that you don't know. And for me, the place I want to get to is the place where you can take what you're good at and you can teach me. And I can take what I'm good at and I can teach you, rather than what we see right now, which is everybody sort of lying and pretending they know everything, right? I'm sure you guys are on the internet, right? I see this all the time. People just straight up lie to you about knowing things they don't. There's this new anti-communist woman, Xi Van Fleet, right? Who is Chinese and straight up like works with victims of communism organization and all that. Now, she straight up lies about communism for a living, writes books on it, right? I chime in, I go, why are you lying about this? If you grew up in China, wouldn't you have learned what Marxism is in grade school? Because you do. And so I asked her, and she says, if you read my book, we'll talk about it. So I began reading it, right? There's a little bit, it's not out yet, but there's a little bit you can read in PDF form online. And I explained one of the lies, right? Guess who started ignoring me as soon as I do that? This woman, right? There's always people are lying and pretending they know things that they don't on the internet. That's why we need to arm ourselves with this education like we were talking about earlier, right? If we have our own Marxist analysis, we can't be fooled by none of that shit. I'm sorry I'm swearing so much tonight. I'm a little bit fired up. Honestly, the thing them going after Danny's job is fucking with me right now. So I'm going to be swearing a bit. I apologize. But yeah, so she's just straight up lying. I explain it, and then she ignores it. And that's the thing. If we can just among us, we can't be concerned with these people who are paid to lie and, you know, the ruling class or whatever NGOs push their shit. We can confront it, but we can't improve the way they act. What we can improve is the way we act, especially among each other, right? If someone wants to be a communist, if they genuinely want to be a communist, what they're greeted with when they get into this is snark, backbiting, pretending you know everything, pretending you're smarter than everyone, and using that to push others down in order to prop yourself up. And that, brothers and sisters, is the opposite of fulfilling what communism is, of embodying what communism is. We must always be honest because communism demands honesty. It demands us knowing the facts about the world and explaining them and using that to change the world, right? If we're not honest in that, we can't do it. Therefore, dishonesty ain't going to cut it for us. We need to hold ourselves to a much higher standard. And so when we talk to each other, if someone greets you with that sort of middle-class social chauvinist ego where knowing everything is what scores the cool points, and the way to score that is to pretend you know nothing and they know everything, and you lie, you twist what they're saying, etc. If someone does that to you, be patient with them, because that's what they're greeted with as soon as they get to the left. So that's what they think, even subconsciously, that's what we're told a communist is, but it is not, right? So be patient. Explain and walk them through things, maybe help them point out the errors in their own thinking as they're doing this, right? Ask questions. You know, when they say like, oh, Stalin's an evil dictator that killed millions of babies and ate their babies and their babies and their babies, blah, 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 right? When they say that, go, where do you get that from? Right? Like, I've never heard this. I've never read anything like that. Let's go into it. Show me. And then we know that don't exist. So we can help them get to that conclusion on their own. And that's the key. Rather than telling someone what time it is, help them figure out how to get a watch, right? Help them come to those conclusions on their own. That is how we actually win hearts and minds. And so I do this with my coworkers, right? I use these guys as an example all the time. It's one guy, Kevin, that I work with. Huge Midwestern Marx fan. Now, when I met him, he was, telling me about Ron Paul and, Marjorie Taylor Greene, just typical whatever conservative media tells you is good. That was his shit, right? So what I do is I play on what he already knows, and I bring that forward. And what's one of the tropes that goes along with that? A sincere distrust of the media. And when I sort of go like, well, where do you get that from, right? Where do you get this idea of communism from? Because I've studied this my whole life, and you're telling me things I've never heard. This forcing everyone to be equal, where does that come from? What are you talking about, right? And so he's like, well, so-and-so said it. And I go, okay, let's see where they got it from, right? Never leads anywhere. And so then I can, bring up, there's a quote I love from Marx that I bring up in these times. It's the only time he ever said communism is blank. And it's in the German ideology. And I'm going to look it up real quick. Marx quote we call communism. Okay. He says, sorry, I'm like pulling stuff around. Okay. He says communism is for us not a state of affairs which is to be established, an ideal to which reality will have to adjust itself. We call communism the real movement which abolishes the present state of things. The conditions of this movement result from the premises now in existence. What's he saying? And I walk my coworkers through this, right? At the end of the day, what he's saying is that communism is the real movement of history. It's history happening through the general laws that we discover with Marxism, right? And I make sure to add that like abolish is a really bad word there. The word he uses in German is Aufbau, right? Which is a Hegelian term, and it's a very, very Hegel-like, right? It means to sort of preserve what a thing is through its transition into a higher stage, which changes it into something else. So the only way for society to be preserved is through revolution, right? That's why when Marx talks about the class struggle coming to a head, he talks about that either we see a revolution and a new ruling class happen, or the destruction of the contending classes, right? I just lost my train of thought. I apologize. Applebaum. Yeah. So when we transition to socialist society, to the new thing, it isn't some predetermined form. We don't know, what policy A or policy B will be. None of that. We don't know that. That is determined by the material premises now in existence, right? What we do know is that it's society going on past the point where the old form could no longer hold, where revolution was necessary, right? So when a seed sprouts and a plant is born, that is a revolution. That is sort of the revolutionary transition from seed form to sprout form. The same thing, the essence is preserved, and the only way it's preserved is in that transition into a plant, right? If it doesn't transition into that plant, it dies. Just like society falls apart And you get fascism if you don't have a revolution. Anyway, so I walk them through that, right? Oh, I'm seeing a few questions. I apologize. Julie asks, saw this on Instagram. Was Hitler pure evil as they portrayed him? Or was he just another warmonger like Biden, Netanyahu, where the facts over dramatized? Why do we believe Western historians and media? Good question. Never just believe. Always look for yourself. I've read Hitler. I've read Mussolini. I've read all the like weird Italian anarchists that fascism rose out of, like Malatesta. I've read all these people, right? Hitler was, what is evil, right? Weird, vague term you could apply to this or that. My subjective view of what evil is, absolutely. Read Mein Kampf. It is a screed against Jews, Marxism, and the way the world is, right? And a lot of the time, what they'll do is when you talk about the ruling class lying about communism, they'll say the same thing about fascism, right? Like, that's just what the Nazis say. Like, okay, well, let's see if they're right. Let's see if we're right. Let's actually look into the facts and see what's what, right? And when we do that, we discover that everything that our ruling class says about the Holocaust is pretty much spot on. What they say about communism, however, is not. Now, they've even downplayed certain parts of the Holocaust and what happened afterwards because they were so chummy with the Nazis. We all know the term Operation Paperclip, right? Where they brought a bunch of Nazis over and put them into work in our establishment, working for our ruling class, right? So there's that. A lot of times what they'll do is they will relate socialism to National Socialism, right? And this is one they do to anyone who isn't like ultra left or very, childishly surface level in their understanding of these things. They see it in binaries rather than a dialectic. The USA is all bad or all good, right? You can't understand it as a contradiction for them. They'll say that if you believe in the progressive nature and love your country as an American, you're a national socialist, right? If you talk about the question of socialism in one country, right? The fact that revolution physically cannot happen everywhere all over the world all at once, they will call you a national socialist. But this is silliness, right? What did Hitler mean when he said National Socialism? Right? First, he writes right in Mein Kampf that they stole a lot of slogans and symbols from the left, like the red on their flag, to mess with people and to get people into their meetings so that then they could talk to them. Because the communists were very popular, the Social Democrats were very popular. But on a deeper level, what he says, so you got to understand the way these words are used. First, remember that socialism is not, predefined. There is no predetermined form of what socialism is. The word is instead and develops as a general category. For Marxism, all it means is the next stage, right? But really, it comes from, and Robert Owen used it first in English. It only means a society that serves society itself, right? It was used in contradistinction to liberalism, socialism, right? A society that serves all of society rather than the liberal, individual, and conflicting interests of the minority ruling class. Meaning the masses are all left behind, right? I'm going to open a seltzer here. I apologize. But so this is how Marx used it. This is how Lenin used it, etc. Right? So this is also how the Nazis used it. And what they said is this society that serves society itself The Marxists, they're all wrong. The communists are all evil, and they want, to control you, blah, blah, the same basic nonsense. The whole middle class anti-communism, that was them to a T. What they said is the only way to achieve this is by what Hitler called socializing the German people, right? And so what does this mean? For them, it means not class struggle, which we correctly explain is objective and happens regardless of how we feel about it or look at it. They say that class collaboration is what's happening and what is needed to be pushed from the top down. Which makes sense in an era where the ruling class needs someone to put a boot down on all of the working class struggles happening. Just like in Germany when the Nazis were rising up, right? Keep in mind, they were funded by the industrialists, right? And even our industrialists here in the U.S., the Ford cartel was huge in funding Nazis. Anyway, so in Hitler's socialism, if you're a worker, that's just your place. You serve society by working, getting exploited, letting your kids get exploited, etc. If you're a bourgeois, you serve society by owning and exploiting people and all that. If you're an aristocrat that owns land, that's how you serve society, right? So that was them creating National Socialism. And they figured this could only happen on a national level because they were also race essentialists, right? Which basically the main philosophical underlying theory they use, which is wrong, is that we are all inherently different and antagonistic to each other. That there is no universal humanity that connects us. We share no similarities from nation to nation, right? This is why their Aryan was an Uberman or whatever the hell they called it, right? Oh, I keep throwing my pen. I'm so sorry, guys. Which, Marxism says the exact opposite. It proves, actually, by historical explanation, that there is a common thread to humanity. There is universal and particular. It's not either or. It is both. It is always both, right? That universal humanity arises in different forms and in different classes, right? And in different societies. Different classes have different class struggles, right? What did he say? Free men and slave, plebeian and lord, etc., right? All over the world, universal humanity takes different forms. We all share these common characteristics that happens in different ways in every time it happens. And so this is another thing that connects us with our brothers and sisters in Palestine right now. Another universal historical formation of a working class, right? In a struggle against a ruling class. Theirs for sovereignty and self-determination, which is the sort of foundational necessity of overthrowing a ruling class. They need to kick out the colonizer before they can do that. And we've had a lot of experience in this form of class struggle right here in the U.S. I'm finally going to be releasing my reproletarianization pamphlet very soon. But in it, I go into a little bit how we see American history. I call it the American trajectory, right? Which is the formation of the American people as the American people. And to be brief, it comes out of Du Bois, obviously, right? He's the father of American Marxism. How could it not? But what we see is three revolutions in this country, right? And each one marks a nodal point in the American people becoming the American people and having that sort of sovereignty that it takes to build a socialism, right? To actually overthrow the bourgeois class of this people and institute a worker state. The first is the revolution to kick out the British colonizer, right? But this leaves us in this era where we have a huge section of our working masses who are enslaved, who aren't even considered fully human. And beyond being disgusting, this stagnates the development of the American people, right? How could it do anything but? And we get a lot of this, and I go into it from Marx, right? And the famous quote, well, that labor in the white skin cannot be free, while in the black it is branded, right? He's not saying that it shouldn't. He's saying that it can't for a reason, right? Because that implies something about the society we're talking about. Next, we have the Second Revolution, which is at the end of the Civil War, what Du Bois called the general strike, right? This was the black enslaved working class rising up and going over to fight with those who were fighting its enemy, the people who dared call themselves owners of other people. And another point on going to war with the army you have, not the army you want. The Northern soldiers weren't interested in fighting alongside these newly self-freed black people. They weren't. Most of them were very racist. They did it anyway, though. Necessity is what drove them there. Necessity is what drove these newly freed slaves to go to the Northern Army to fight, because that's what they had to do. And in doing so, they established their humanity before the entire world. They didn't have it granted by, pompous middle-class white people who would, like say like, oh, we're so sorry. They stood up and they fucking took it, right? And that's how it happens, always, historically. And it's a damn good thing they did. Anyway, so Du Bois talks about this as a general strike because what it does is it deprives the Southern forces of labor, right? And this goes into the necessity of doing something with all of these newly freed working people, right? And this causes Reconstruction, the first ever dictatorship of a working class. Sorry, Paris Commune, much respect, and I know everybody talks about the Paris Commune all the time, but we had that shit first, and it lasted way longer. So, USA. Anyway, so as this develops, there's still a kernel of the old within the new as it goes. We see the counter-revolution and Reconstruction destroyed. Then we see the era of Jim Crow. Now, these people stood up, demanded their humanity, took it, but still weren't made second-class citizens. There is still this essential division that was enforced legally. This leads us to the Civil Rights Movement, a political revolution that changes everything from a political level, establishing full bourgeois right for everybody, right? Everybody now, full bourgeois right, voting and property and blah, 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 blah. All the bourgeois gifts and blessings, as Engels said. Now this lays the basis of the possibility of today. One, it creates a social consciousness that is different because of that lack of the enforced underclass. The racism fades. Now, I'm not saying there's no racism, but we are less racist right now as a people than we ever have been in our history. That's just a fact. Remember, there used to be lynchings on the daily, right? There used to be black people beaten and shot and arrested by police, and nothing would happen to them, right? Nobody would stand up for them. Now, George Floyd is murdered by the police, and everyone stands up, no matter where they're from. The largest protest demonstration in this country's history happened after that. That means something. And it means that people stood up because they killed one of us. He wasn't one of them anymore. He was one of us, right? And that means something. This is a creation of the American people. and the possibility of the struggle for socialism. Because everybody thought, well, let's say like within the Black community, you thought you get this, everything should be fine, right? Turns out, nope. It's still impoverished, still proletarian, etc., still experiencing discrimination and all kinds of racism still there, etc. So we get that and the withering of racism within white America, and you get this sort of new American people coming into being, more American than ever before. This new thing that has to develop because it's a material thing develops, right? And so to go all the way back to where we were at the beginning. Now I can go into reproletarianization, sure, but when we're sort of just getting into this or we're ultra left, we don't see this as the history of the US. We don't see MLK embodying the US because he was the nascent and developing aspect of the contradiction. They only see the, America with a bunch of K's and burning flags and all that ultra stuff, right? And so that's a theoretical mistake. And I don't even remember how I got onto that, but there it is. Anyway, so, oh God, I completely forget where I was. Let's look at my little thing here. Okay. From there, right, we're witnessing sort of the end of the middle classes, right? One of the big reasons the civil rights movement was able to gain as much ground as it was imperialism, believe it or not, in a roundabout way. I'll explain, right? So at the end of World War II, something that had never happened before happens, right? We get the proliferation of one imperialist nation, ours, over the rest, just over all of them. And it's sort of financializing as time moves on and creating a middle working class. Now, to understand this, we need to understand what class is, right? And here's another reason that when we talk to coworkers, family, friends, etc., we're not going to talk about class the way they think we are, because we're going to go deeper and give them, in our own words, the real Marxist view, rather than giving them a definition. If you've been following the Institute long enough, you should know that definitions are dangerous for us, right? Because they can never truly describe a thing. Engels calls them the death of scientific thinking for a reason. So we're not going to say you're working class if you work for a wage. Nope, that ain't it. We're not going to say you're bourgeois if you own property. Nope, that ain't it, right? What we're going to say is that society is always in contradiction, right? It exists as a contradiction since the beginning of alienation and property, right? So what class is the reflection in people of this contradiction that is society going about society in a certain way. So the bourgeois mode of society or capitalist mode of production is privatized profits but socialized labor, right? And that reflects itself in the people. It creates the industrial proletariat, right? We get the technology to have these giant factories and mass-produced commodities, etc. Creates this new contradiction between people, right, who are now in antagonism against each other. What's good for one is bad for the other, and vice versa, right? And that's because there's always something old, new, or there's always a bit of the old left within the new, and that is the sort of feudal privilege, right? Ownership. And all of classical economics was trying to get around this. Land rights, etc., right? Privatized profit is actually a remnant of feudalism, but we don't have to get into all that, right? What happens after World War II is that we have working class people, right? Who, because of a bunch of different things, and we're going to go into these, are able to rise out of the proletariat, losing a proletarian character, right? They're not a labor aristocracy. They're not in antagonism with working class people elsewhere. They become middle class. Secondly, never let anyone tell you middle class is not a Marxist term. Marx and Engels use the term all the time. One of my favorite quotes from Marx is that he says that the middle class cannot see out of the middle class. It assumes that its conditions are the conditions of everyone and thinks it above all class antagonism, right? That's from the 18th Premier, by the way. Anyway, so at the end of World War II, we get this new middle class rising, right? So what creates the proletariat? What essentially is the proletariat? It is this class of people necessary for society to reproduce itself and us to create all the things that make us a society that, work in factories and embody these commodities with value, right? And that surplus value is essential to the creation of new capital, right? And around we go, because what does capital do? It accumulates. So we have this proletariat, right? And Marx goes to great length in Capital to explain essential outcomes of this process of capital accumulation. And one of them is that the proletariat is always without fail, minimized to the level of sustenance, right? Or the oldie-timey equivalent of saying we work paycheck to paycheck, unable to afford a $500 emergency. So, I mean, we all hear that all the time, right? But what happens after World War II? Because of the militant class struggle, existence of the Soviet Union, existence of the Black Freedom Movement, et cetera, and imperialism reaching a stage where there's enough capital centralized in order to claw some back for working people, we get working people who are able to win these things from capital, right? They're not bribed. It's not given to them magnanimously. They're not given things to, buy them off. They fought and died for these things. Many, many people died for these things, right? Communist Party was outlawed, basically. Being a communist was outlawed in order to try to avoid losing these things, right? And then when they could no longer do that, they let go of them in a way that is also class struggle against us, right? Debts, etc. But that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. So these working class people are sort of able to accumulate enough that they're no longer working paycheck to paycheck. They're able to save. They're able to, and this is most important, buy homes, owning something of their own. This is what loses a proletarian character for these people, right? No longer thrust down to this level of societal reproduction. And so, at the same time, we get the proliferation of a higher form of technology. This grows the professional classes who've always been in the middle, right? And when we say middle class in a Marxist sense, all we mean is between this general contradiction within society, falling somewhere in between it. Peasants in the feudal era, right? They're in the middle. Now they can be lower peasants or upper peasants, but they're in the middle. They're not creating surplus value for the bourgeoisie. It's just not what they do. So, like saying middle class isn't always a negative thing. Plenty of revolutionary peasants, blah, blah, blah. Now, as time goes on, we see imperialism itself get to a higher stage, get to the stage it's in now, where financialization basically gets completed. Technology takes off like never before in history. And we find ourselves in this era of reproletarianization, where the former middle can no longer stay the middle because of them. And I'm not going to go into this. It's all in the pamphlet. But what it does is all of these people who were able to provide this stable life in suburbs, etc., right? Where one parent was able to support an entire family, had a good union job, or maybe was a teacher or an office worker or whatever. That was a middle-class lifestyle, right? They weren't within the proletariat. Now, their kids, however, don't have that future in front of them anymore, do they? Over 60%, and it's close to 70 right now. It sort of wavers between 60 and 80, believe it or not. They work paycheck to paycheck, unable to afford that $500 emergency, meaning we are stuck in this sort of way of being where all we're doing is reproducing society with sustenance. We're bringing a little money in and then it's going right out. We are unable to accumulate, right? But the industrialization has already happened, right? Here in the imperialist countries, especially in the US, there aren't these giant factories that there used to be. There aren't a lot of jobs like mine left. Mostly what we have is low-wage service work, right? Which is undignified, first of all. I mean, we're sort of, when we do this, and I've done it many times, we're reduced to the level of smiling robots, right? Doing work that a computer can do. And I say this in the pamphlet. And then we're pushed out of, neighborhood after neighborhood as the gentrified hipsters smile at us from behind ironic mustaches and bicycles that are worth $3,000, talking about how they sympathize with us, right? Anyway, you can tell I'm not a very big fan of the PMC types, the remnants of the middle class, etc. But this re-proletariat, who are swimming in debt up to their ears because we are still told that going to college is how we get that middle class lifestyle, right? How we leave this re-proletariat we're all in, or proletariat in some of our cases, right? And enter that middle. But really, all it is a big debt trap. Let's be real. Entire thing is swimming in debt. It puts the middle classes in debt, which also means that they are gettable, as their enemy is our enemy, materially speaking. But so this creates this re-proletariat, the children of that middle class falling down to the level of the proletariat. And this creates opportunity. This creates optimism for me. But it brings with it a lot of problems, right? It brings with it, because of the rapidity with which this happens and the communities in which it happens, it brings with it all sorts of middle class prejudices, right? It brings social chauvinism. And one of the big forms of social chauvinism right now is exactly what we were talking about when I began this whole big long rant, right? This lying about knowing things. This belief that we are somehow the enlightened few, and all of the other people who don't know what we know, they're unenlightened rabble, and we need to cancel them all. They're all backwards and reactionary. And let's talk about the word reactionary for a minute. Now, this word is one of the most misused words that I hear nowadays. I hear it used to refer to people who say they have conservative social values, right? Which Marxists, we go either way. It doesn't matter to us. Some people have family values. They believe that, the family unit is a good singular central unit for society. Maybe they're religious, whatever else. It doesn't matter. Others are very liberal about it. Again, doesn't matter. Marxists seek to unite all of these people. But a lot of times people use reactionary to refer to these people, right? Or to refer to people who may be bigoted in one way or another. Reactionary is a word that is used in contradistinction to progressive. And when we're looking at this from the Marxist perspective, this means in the realm of social motion, of history moving forward. So you're a reactionary if you are attempting to move society backwards. You are a conservative if you are attempting to conserve what is. And you are a progressive if you are attempting to go forwards, right? On a material level. In 2023, in the USA, there is only one way actually forward, and it is through revolution into socialism. Backwards could mean before the civil rights revolution. It could mean before any of that, right? When you're talking about there is actually reaction. So there's a slogan a bunch of leftists use, right? Land back, which could be a very progressive thing, right? Or it could be a very reactionary thing, depending on who's using it. Are they using it in this social chauvinist way where they believe that Native Americans are all like, mystical tribal people that are primitive and they want to just let them have their own ethno-states or whatever? Some people do that, right? That would be a reactionary form. Or is it talking about a united struggle for socialism where the people wronged get land for themselves, right? Well, basically stuff like that. Which brings us also to the Marxist view of the terms left and right, which is based in this, right? All of this comes from the French Revolution. The progressives who were interested in moving society forward sat on the left side of the auditorium and not the right. The ones who wanted to go back to monarchy sat on the right. That's it. That's where it comes from, and always that's in a different form. But when we talk about left and right, that's what we're talking about. That's what I'm talking about anyway. Any real Marxist, that's what they mean. But that's not how it's used in our bourgeois institutions, is it? Right? Because they want to change how words are used to us. They want us to sort of have this predetermined set of vague notions and ideals. This is left, this is right, and they can change those over time. That ain't it. It changes, but materially speaking. Oh, and Cobra left while I was ranting. Sorry about that. If you're watching this, brother, later, have a good night. I think maybe I'll get going here pretty soon. We've been going just about an hour. I think we've gone over a lot of good stuff. Let's do this first. If anyone has any questions for me, go ahead and ask them. And we'll take a few sort of AMA type things before we go. Nope. Okay. Awesome. Well, it has been awesome. It has been so much fun talking to everybody here tonight. I think I'm going to make this Real Talk show a regular thing. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope y'all are too. We're going to go out with the International the same way we always do. Everybody have a great night. Love and solidarity.
Cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of